You might have been thinking about moving to Southeast Asia to enjoy the tropical lifestyle, the low cost of living, and everything that the region has to offer. Today I'm going to tell you what I'd personally do if I were in the same shoes again. Now, if you're a digital nomad, if you're in your 20s, in your 30s, actually it doesn't matter how old you are, and you're considering a move to Southeast Asia, the question is, how can you make it happen? I personally wouldn't move to Southeast Asia without a sound business plan, without a sound relationship plan. That's in the event that you're single, because these things are important. You make a plan before you commit to something, not after you commit to something or someone. You do it before you commit to something or before you commit to somebody. That's how it should be done. Now, did I do everything perfectly when I moved to Southeast Asia in 2011? Heck no. I did a lot wrong. I had no real plan in terms of how I was going to date, how much time I would allow myself before I'd enter a relationship. I had no game plan. I really didn't have a game plan. I was just a young kid. I was in my early 20s. And like I said, it happened in 2011. So it took me a lot of time to learn. But if I were to do it all over again, I would definitely have a sound plan. When it comes to dating, I would have a sound plan. Instead of rushing into a relationship with a person I barely know, I would take at least half a year to a year to meet several people, to meet several women, and get to know them, because you cannot understand somebody who you don't know. And you shouldn't enter a relationship with somebody who you don't know. It's pretty common sense. But when you're young and you're driven by the tropics, you're driven by Orient, by the new, if that's you, then it's sometimes very difficult to stick to your original plan. But it's so important that you do, because if you enter a relationship too quickly without having considered all the moving parts, oftentimes that relationship won't last. So the longer you know a person, the more time you've spent with a person or with that person, the better you'll be able to judge how that person behaves during certain situations, during times of difficulties, during times of hectic. And so that's something I'll do differently instead of just going for it right away. But when we're young, we make mistakes, and it's very important to forgive yourself for the mistakes that you made. It's part of life. You won't learn until you try. So have a clear plan, because if you're a single guy, or even if you're a single girl, and you want to move to Southeast Asia, chances are you meet some people or you meet a person who you really like. But it's really important for you to consider everything, like how do you want your relationship to function? You know, what's important to you for the next, 5 to 10 years? Because when you're very young, okay, so this advice is when you're very young, you don't really know what you want 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You think you know, but the reality is you really don't. You have no idea how your life might change during your time in Southeast Asia. You don't know how you will personally change, how the environment changes you. You don't know any of that. So it's really important that you have a game plan in place for that. So even if you start dating, don't get too serious too quickly. What do I mean by that? Well, you take some time before you move in with a girl. That's very, very important. Don't move in with a girl after a month or 2 months of dating. You can do that, but it very often comes back and bites you in the hiney. You don't know what you don't know. So make sure you allow sufficient time. Once you're sure, let's say half a year has passed, you've been dating a couple times a week, you've been seeing each other, you've been exchanging ideas with each other, right? You've been having a good time, emotionally, spiritually, physically, you've been having a great time. That's when you can consider moving in. Assuming that you're in agreement, assuming you're in alignment, assuming there's respect, assuming that it does make sense. So you have to weigh this for yourself, right? You have to analyze the situation for yourself. Nobody can give you that advice. You have to observe it yourself. Then you have to fact check, right? You take a look at your relationship plan and you have a look at the relationship that you have right now. How many things do you actually have that you planned you were going to have, right? So really, really important things here, right? So don't rush into a relationship with a Southeast Asian woman or man too quickly, because it's very easy to commit, but very easy to distance yourself, especially once you moved in, especially if you have kids or if you get married. It gets complicated quickly, and it might stay complicated for a long time. So think twice before you act, and really consider the whole picture, what you want, your life goals, her or his life goals. Really consider the whole picture. It's super, super important that you do. something that I did right, and I was good at that. And what I'm talking about here is the business plan that I had. That's the part of my life, in the initial stages during my time in Southeast Asia, that part of my life was actually really good. I had a business plan, I followed it, and I met a partner, and he happened to live in Kuching, Malaysia. So that's how I ended up there. We worked together well over a year before I actually made the move. I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful for this special relationship that we had, this special partnership. We prospered together, we worked together, we were friends, and we're still our friends today, and we just had a lot going on. And that's very important in business, right? Your business partners oftentimes also become your close personal friends. And it's really important that you nourish your business partners, right? You treat them well, you listen to them, you respect them, you just apply good morals, because that's how people will stay with you for a long time. The same also holds true for relationships, for friendships. It's the same concept. You do that. So that's the part that I did right, okay? When I moved there, I had a business plan, I had some savings, not a whole lot, but I was making money, and I had plans to generate even more income through different revenues, and that's important, right? If you want to increase your net worth, you got to have some income streams. So I had that in place. However, that doesn't mean that income streams don't fall apart. So what I'd recommend to you is that, make sure you have some savings. Make sure you have a sound business plan. Because when you get to Southeast Asia, yes, the living costs will be lower than they are in Europe, will be lower than they are in Australia, will be lower than they are in North America. There's no question about that. However, there are also many distractions in the Far East. And we're talking about dating. We're talking about just enjoying life. Life is very enjoyable in the Far East, right? The tropical weather, the cheap outdoor dining options that you have. We're talking about services. If you want to go get a massage, it's pretty addictive. You might end up getting a massage every day, and sooner or later, you might end up spending hundreds of dollars a month, or even more than that. This is something that you really have to think about. Make sure you have a plan, and that's just one of them, right? There's obviously also other things, right? For instance, entertainment, other forms of entertainment. You hang out with your guys, with your girls. You go out for drinks, you go out for food, and sooner rather than later, your budget grows and grows and grows. Your expenses grow and grow and grow. So you don't want that to happen. You don't want to fall victim to the environment that you're in, right? So make sure you have a clear plan, make sure you have a budget, you stick to it. Yeah, you got to enjoy life too, so make sure you have some extra in there for the things that you want to do. Make sure that you don't overextend yourself financially, because when you overextend yourself financially, things can get ugly quickly. You run out of money, you may end up in credit card debt, and you don't want that, because it's a cheap region, you can have a great time. However, it does require planning, and most importantly, it requires a lot of discipline. Without the discipline part, you really don't have much going for you, because you can have all the plans that you want. If you can't implement these plans, if you don't stick to these plans, then you might end up broke. And I've seen people like that back in 2011 and specifically 2013 in Vietnam. I've seen people who went broke, who had to go back to their home country and stay with their parents again, because they just overextended themselves financially to the point when they just could not live there anymore. They were unproductive. They fell victim to the environment there. They didn't work as much anymore. They did everything half-assed, and it just wasn't enough anymore to generate an income to support themselves financially. Make sure you don't fall into this trap. Super important. The last point I wanted to touch on is, of course, the current visa system. That has changed a lot post-pandemic. Post-pandemic is a different world. Of course, not all countries have changed as much as others. If we take a look at Vietnam, a country that was very open to foreigners pre-pandemic, has changed, right? Its visa system drastically. Now, if you come to Vietnam, you only get a 30-day tourist visa. Technically, you can leave the country, come back in. Hopefully, you will get another 30 days, but there are no guarantees. This may work now, but it may not work 6 months from now, 12 months from now. So you don't know what you don't know. So the visa system in Vietnam is difficult right now. A friend of mine incorporated a company, secured himself a 2-year renewable residence permit. Well, he thinks it's a 2-year renewable residence permit, but nobody knows, not even him, and possibly not even the government, not even the local authorities, what the requirements will be a year from now, 2 years from now. Problem is the ever-changing visa system. And that's not just the case in Vietnam. If we take a look at Malaysia, a country that has made drastic alterations to the Malaysia My Second Home program, really upset a lot of people who bet their life on this visa, on this program, and they were told during the pandemic, this happened during the pandemic, they were told that they had to meet the new requirements in order for them to remain in the country. Of course, that upset a lot of people because the initial promise was something entirely different. It was that they could stay in the country under the old conditions no matter what happens in the future. However, that has changed. Well, it changed for a certain amount of time during the pandemic, but then the government decided, okay, old pass holders can remain in the country for the long term and under the same conditions as when they signed up. And people obviously appreciated that, even though the government considered and announced that also old pass holders need to meet the new requirements. So it's a really difficult situation to be right now. Living in Malaysia on a tourist visa is possible, but again, you're gambling, and whenever you're gambling, you're doing things that are outside of your control, and chances are it may not work 6 months from now, 12 months from now. You may be denied admission into a country like Malaysia or Vietnam. Nobody knows what the future holds, so the best thing you can do is secure yourself some kind of a mid to long-term visa, which is possible. You can get an entrepreneur visa from Malaysia, you can get a digital nomad visa. Of course, there are requirements, saving requirements, and or net worth requirements, and or income requirements. It all depends, right? It all depends on the program, but there are options. The Philippines is one of the countries that did not change its tourist visa system. It's the same system today as it was 3 years ago. So there is consistency there, and people appreciate that, and that's why a lot of people who are living in Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, they now move to the Philippines because there is predictability in the Philippines. Predictability and reliability are two very, very important aspects of living in Southeast Asia. So they have that. Thailand is difficult. You can get a Thai elite visa for roughly $17,000, $18,000 right now, depending on the exchange rates. I don't know what it is right now, but it's 600,000 Thai baht for the 5-year visa, or $1 million for the 20-year visa. That's Thai baht, right? $1 million Thai baht. Or you could get a student visa for Thailand. It's also possible to incorporate a company. I'm not a fan of, finding a local partner who I can give 51% to, especially if I don't know the person. So that's a requirement when you want to open up a Thai company. So yes, if I was in the early stages of my digital nomad journey, I might consider living in Southeast Asia today, but knowing what I know today, I may choose not to live in Southeast Asia because I now have more experience in Latin America. I always had a lot of experience in Europe, but Latin America is just a more liberal place in terms of residency, citizenship, property ownership, company ownership, right? You can do 100%, right? You can own 100% of a foreign company in Latin countries. And the same also holds true for property ownership, right? You can own 100% of a property in Latin America. In Southeast Asia, that's very difficult, right? There are few exceptions far in between. So really consider the full picture. And if you want to move to Southeast Asia, have a sound business plan, have a relationship plan, a dating plan, and also a long-term plan in terms of what you want to do in the region. Do you want to own land? Do you want to own property? What kind of visa do you need? How long do you want to stay? Right? Make sure you have everything figured out before you move there. These are very, very important questions that I highly recommend that you answer before you pull the trigger. Please do that. What's your favorite country in Southeast Asia? Leave a comment below and let us know. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm uploading new videos on digital nomad locations, travel updates, and investment advice several times a week right now. And if you got some more time left, check out these videos. Thank you for watching.